Welcome to this episode of Cleartone Podcast. My name is David Rodriguez, and today's special guest is Nathan Fulmizi. He is a band director for the Orange Coast Musical Arts, as well as a freelance bass trombone player in both Orange County and Los Angeles. Nathan, thank you for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, David. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. So I'm going to go ahead and ask you the first question. How did you get involved with music? How did that start? What did your music journey start with?
Sure. I got started in music at a very early age. My grandparents actually started their own music business about 15 years ago. So I was the perfect age to be their guinea pig, me and all my cousins and brothers. So I actually started taking piano lessons with my grandma when I was very young, like, I don't know, the usual age when you start piano, definitely earlier than 10. And then when I was old enough, my grandfather was like, hey, you're old enough to learn a wind instrument. Why don't you come and learn a wind instrument? So I went into his studio and he showed me the flute. So he played the flute. I said, oh, that's really pretty. I like that. That sounds really nice. I said, maybe I'll pick that one. He said, well, hold on, I'm not done. Let me keep going. So then he picked up the clarinet. And I said, oh, that's got a really nice sound. I kind of like that. He picked up the trumpet. And I said, that's really loud. I like that. He picked up the trombone and did this. And I kind of never looked back after that moment. I was fascinated by the trombone and its slide. That's kind of how most bone players are. They're very mechanical people. And the minute they see that slide, man, they go, I love that. So after that, I played trombone through elementary school, middle school. And in high school, I was playing in the jazz band. I was a sophomore in high school. I was playing third trombone in the jazz band. And I was playing very loud. My band director always told me, Nathan, play softer. I say, okay. He keeps saying that. And then just one day he got so mad, I could see the steam coming out of his ears. He stands up and goes, get this kid a bass trombone. So after that, I picked up the bass trombone and I kind of never looked back since. So that's kind of how I got started with the trombone.
Okay, great. Well, could you talk about how piano helped you? Would you say that was an added benefit, having piano background and then going into a wind instrument?
Oh, what 100%. Not only piano, but I also recommend people to join choirs and learn other instruments. But piano in particular, I love piano from a music education standpoint because everything is laid out. You look down, everything's laid out. You can see the chords, you can see the music theory. That's why in music theory classes, like in college, you always go to the piano. It's like, why do you go to the piano? It's all laid out right there. And I think what piano does is it gets your ears open to just what music sounds like, what it's like to play. It also works your hands. And you'll realize with other instruments, we're using our mouths, ears, and hands, whatever instrument it is. And piano helps with those things. Well, except the embouchure, right, for wind instruments. But I think piano really focuses in on the ear training and just learning the basics of music, because like you could pick up a wind instrument and learn the basics of music, but it's nothing like there's nothing like a student starting on piano and then going into an instrument. They already, without even knowing it, they already have music theory and ear training kind of in their back pocket. So I would always recommend it, especially to younger students pre-fourth grade.
Right. Yeah. And then it's in some ways multi-dimensional because you're having to read the staves, right? And you're not just reading treble clef or bass clef, or in some cases alto clef.
Mm-hmm.
You're reading both. And so I think that's an added benefit as well. You're having to read both right hand, left hand, treble and bass, where you pick up the trumpet or the flute, or you're only reading the treble clef.
Yeah, for sure. It's good to get the treble and the bass clef going. Putting both hands together, like you watch a piano lessons. Okay, the right hand, now the left hand. We put them together. That's you. Your brain is shooting off fireworks. So it's really good for them to start on it. Get the hand dexterity going. Yeah, totally.
Okay. And then what was your involvement like? You mentioned you were in the jazz group in high school.
Mm-hmm.
What other groups were you involved with? Well, when did you first start playing in elementary, or when did you first start playing in school? I'm sorry. I might have missed
Sure,
that.
sure. Yeah, yeah. I'll talk about my process with that. So I started in like the fourth grade, I think, and I played in just beginning band. Like I did, like here's the note, here's how to play this note, here's how to read the music, right? I started there, and I never stopped. And I know some people are like, oh yeah, I put the instrument down and then I picked it up years later. I never did anything like that. I was always 100% like trombone, right? And yeah, I picked up other instruments, and we could talk about that later if you want, but trombone specifically, the minute I picked it up, my education was always focused primarily on the trombone. So I did elementary school, right? Did beginning band. Then I went into middle school and did the concert band and the wind ensemble. In high school was when things kind of blew up. My music experience went from like low to very high, particularly because I went to a very um, musically inclined high school. I went to Walnut High School,
Okay.
and my uncle was the band director there. And I would get up at 5 every morning to drive with him to Walnut because I lived in OC. I would get in the car with him, go up there, and I learned how to play the stand-up bass for Zero Period Orchestra. I was in the marching band, I was in the wind ensemble, and I was in the jazz band. I did 4 periods of music every year through high school. So my music experience from middle school to high school was really intense. It was a lot, but I was taking private lessons at the time, and I took my craft pretty seriously, I would say, about my sophomore year in high school. But yeah, the main groups I played in was I played in the orchestra. Like I said, I because my uncle was at school so early, he was like, "Hey, learn a string instrument because I'm here, and why don't you come and learn?" So I was like, "Okay, well, I don't really know what to play." And he said, "Well, here's a bass, right?" And then I started learning the bass. I learned electric, and I played stand up in the orchestra. And it was a really great double because I could already read bass clef,
Right.
and it was just a really great experience to be able to, okay, I have all of this knowledge, now I'm going to play it to another instrument. It was a very interesting transition. So I had that in Zero Period, and then I was involved, so I was my senior year, I was section leader for bass, and bass is actually my second instrument that I ended up taking pretty seriously. And then after that I would go to marching band, and marching band was the coolest experience. We had like 300 kids in the marching band. We had a huge. I came from a huge music appreciation background with Walnut. It was a lot of. I don't. It wasn't a private school. It's a public school, but the fine arts are very heavily funded. Very, very large.
It's
Like
embedded
I
in the
said,
culture there. Yeah, it's
yeah,
embedded
yeah,
in their culture.
100%. I showed up and I was like, "Is this a private school?" It's like, "No, it's a public school." And I was like, "What?" But anyways, the marching band had like 300 kids in it, right? So it was a really, I would say, a lot of the leadership things that I learned was in marching band. So in marching band, we did parades, we did field shows. I went to drum major camp to be a band captain, which is like a marching leader, basically. I was section leader. So marching band was a great experience. And I was also in like a sit down setting. I was in the wind ensemble, which was the top kind of orchestral group. And then I was also in the jazz band. So just out of high school, I was pretty on fire for music. So yeah, those are the four main groups I was in. I was in orchestra, marching band, jazz band, wind ensemble. I also did some side groups. I was part of the Tri-M Music Honor Society, which was one of the top kind of um, clubs, and we did a lot of recruiting. I was in Band Buddies, which was a group my friend started actually, and it was an organization or club after school that allowed elementary school students to come and hang out with the high schoolers. We had all these big events. We had all the elementary schools in the area come in, and we would help them with their instrument and do a big concert. It was very cool. So not only was I plugged into the four main groups, I was also doing a lot of side things. So my high school experience was extremely involved.
Yeah, that sounds like an intense high school experience.
Mm-hmm.
So by your sophomore year, you said you were taking music very seriously when you went to high school. So at that point, you decided, I want to have a career in music, or this is something I just really, really enjoy and I just want to do it well. What was the point for that?
That's a good question. I would say before my sophomore year of high school, I didn't really know. I just loved practicing. And then my sophomore year of high school, I started getting, my teacher gave me some orchestral rep, some like concerto rep for bass trombone.
Okay.
And I didn't even know that was like a thing, right? And he was sending me, I watched videos, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to, I just, out of nowhere, I was like, I'm going to try to learn this stuff. And my teacher was very good with coaching me with that and making sure, I'm practicing the right stuff. After that, I was like, I really love playing this instrument. So there were two things that kind of skyrocketed that train of thought. The first thing, it was two things that launched my love for music education and performing as well. For music education, the thing that got me into wanting to learn more how to teach was being section leader in high school. Being section leader, I was able to work with my peers, and they all would always compliment me on, hey, I really didn't understand this concept of air. You helped me with my embouchure, all these things that you don't really, high schoolers aren't thinking about too much at a young age. And I was really good at communicating that. And I kind of noticed like, oh, wow, like I'm really good at communicating this thing that I love. Maybe there's something here. And then the thing that launched my love for where I was like, I think I want to do some performing too, is I auditioned for the SCSBOA wind ensemble, and I got in. That was my junior year. And then my senior year, I auditioned for the SCSBOA All-Star Jazz Band, and I got into that too. And after that, and everyone was always complimenting me like, you're really good. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And then they're like, no, you're really, really good. And, me and myself, I'm very melancholy. I'm very hard on myself. And I never really realized back then, like, these people were encouraging me to move forward in my craft. But yeah, to answer your question, those were the two things, was being section leader and doing some honor bands. And then I was kind of hooked after that.
Okay. And so it never wavered for you. Like you never stopped and said, okay, maybe I'm going to do something different, or, maybe I'm just going to focus more on performance and less on the music education side. It's been consistent for you.
Yeah, I would say where it wavered were my college years. When I started, there was a point in my life, and right now my life looks very different from a few years ago. I used to play part-time and teach part-time.
Okay.
And I was always battling with that. Those two things conflicted. And then I recently got offered a full-time teaching gig, which I decided to take. And I'm very happy with it. So I would say there were some times through college when I was like, I don't want to teach. I just want to play, right? And then it was this thing that slowly grew on me the more I started to teach and realized I had a gift here. So there were times when they were butting heads, but now I've kind of come to peace with it. And the way I view it now is I teach full time, but I play when I can, Okay. So that's kind of how it looks like for me currently.
Right. And I think that's, for a lot of us, that's been that way. Unfortunately, wasn't in the same position as you, where I can kind of decide, I'm going to be a performer, I'm going to be an educator. And so, teaching has taken up most of my time. And then when I have the opportunity, I try to go and play when I can. So yeah, no, I think it's a good balance. I think, at least for me, it's a good balance because I get to do what I really enjoy, which was the teaching side of things. Mm-hmm. And then I get to, when there are the opportunities, I get to play. And so, I really enjoy those moments too. And I think they're good learning moments, for myself, to keep myself going as a musician, that you don't know when there's going to be a call. And so you gotta kind of keep your chops up a little bit. But then I sometimes like to archive, if you would, maybe make video recordings, and then I'll share that with my class, and I'll talk about how, hey, I know that I preach these things to you guys, but I also have to do it too. And, here's me as a performer, not as a teacher. And I know some kids, they enjoy that. Other kids, they're a little bit indifferent, but I think it impacts them in some way. So
I totally agree. And there might be a point in my life where teaching goes on the back burner. That time is not now, though. Especially with everything going on in the world, I really am enjoying teaching. It's definitely been a very humbling experience. And I like what you said about, when you're telling your students, hey, you need to do this, you got to be careful not to be Mr. Hypocrite.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, and then it allows them to see me in a different context, right? Because I'm the authority, or, I'm the adult in the room giving them instruction. And then, they're seeing me from like, the videos that I take from my music stand of me playing, and I'll send like a little message to them, obviously on my phone, and then I'll play it for them when we're in class. And, some of them get a kick out of it. Some of them, they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Middle school kids.
I love the middle schoolers.
Yeah.
They're great.
Middle schoolers are great.
They're funny kids.
So I wanted to ask you this: private lessons. Your grandfather is a professional musician. He's a professional trombone player. And did you ever feel, or I'm sorry, not did you ever feel, but did you study with him when you were going through, your formative years, elementary, middle school, high school? Or did you, because you mentioned private lessons, did you take private lessons with him? Or
I did. My grandfather has been my main teacher most of my life. I have studied with other people, but most of what I have in my back pocket is I attribute to him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. And then, it's cool when you were talking about how, your grandfather, and then your grandmother is a keyboard player.
Yeah. She teaches piano and voice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, very musical background, and, they got all the family said, okay, you're all learning instruments. And it kind of reminds me of like, good old colonial America, and even before that, when there was like lots of families coming over, and they were all, everybody in the family played an instrument, and that was their band. So have you guys ever done that?
That is a great question, David. I love how you worded that. Yes, we have performed together many times in many different scenarios. We are the poster children of our family. Like, we are, like, when you see us, you go, wow, that's like the Brady Bunch, or the what's that family band everyone quotes? I can't remember, but the Partridge Family. Okay. They're the Partridge Family, right? But yeah, that we've I'll give you kind of the family tree real quick, and it is pretty crazy. I have 6. Basically, from my grandparents had 3 kids, and then there's 7 of us that are around my age. My brother plays the trumpet. I have 3 cousins. The oldest plays bass and trombone, and he was a music business major at Cal Poly. He recently graduated. He now works at a church as a sound engineer. I have another cousin that also plays the bass trombone, and he's a music education and performance major at Long Beach. He plays bass trombone. He plays a little bit of piano too. And then there's another cousin I have that plays trumpet and trombone, and has a beautiful tenor voice. He sings. Okay. And then I have another cousin that plays trombone. That's the only girl. Okay. She doesn't play much anymore, but she used to. But yeah, and we have played together, especially when we were younger. It was a lot of like, we go to family parties and play. We go to our friend's Christmas party, play Jingle Bells, right? The only thing we've played together as older is we have a children's worship band that we play and perform. Not currently, but we have like a whole website, and it's a whole thing, and it's kind of like an outreach ministry. But the band is all us. So I play guitar, and I'm like the worship leader, and I play my bone on some solos. My 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 brother are the brass section. So we have a horn section. We kind of sound like Chicago Children's Worship Band. That's basically what it sounds like.
Okay, not bad.
And then yeah. And my wife plays keys and sings. My cousin plays the bass, and then we have a guest drummer and electric guitarist. But yeah, we've played together a lot. Like me and my cousin will get together and play duets. Sometimes we'll get together and just jam. Like it's pretty crazy. We are a big, crazy music family.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
We need more of them.
I agree. And it's really wonderful to see, like, not all of us took music super seriously, but some of us did. And it's a testament to, just because your dad was a blacksmith doesn't mean you have to be a blacksmith. Like I went into music because I wanted to, and my cousin and my brother are the same way. And then there were, more of us that were like, I'm going to do something else, but music will always be there, and you don't always have to do what dad does,
Right. And even as educators, we're not training our students so that they're all going to be professional musicians or
Exactly.
carry on a career as a professional musician or in some, music in some capacity. If we have students who do want to do that, that's fantastic. That's great. And I think for me, at least the overall goal is to create an experience, a positive experience in their lives where they're going to carry it on with them forever. And hopefully, that will spark them to encourage their children to participate when they have kids, or to be, music patrons, pay for concerts, or, support live music, pay for the music content that's online, and not make illegal downloads and things like that. So, that's, that's kind of, where I come from when I, from where I teach that. I'm not teaching because every one of my students has to be a professional musician, or, my desire for them is that my desire is to make sure that they have a positive experience, and that, that's the same for your family. It was making a positive experience. And if you decide to have a career, great. And if you don't want to, well, at least you have a positive experience. And then, like you said, they're supportive of music, even though, it's
of course. It's, I agree with that 100%. You kind of have to realize, as a band director, you're wearing multiple hats. I'm not only a teacher, I'm an administrator, I'm a life coach, you do all kinds of things. And I'm always teaching my students non-music things. Like this past semester, I was on them about time in multiple senses, having good time and being on time.
Right. Yeah.
Like there's many things that you learn in band that you can apply to your life no matter what you're going into. And I can honestly say there are things that marching band taught me that I use every day in my life that have nothing to do with music. Things like discipline, being organized, being a good communicator. Those were all things I learned in high school, that you're not going to get on the chess team or, or something else like that, but I agree. Yeah. And I always encourage my seniors when they graduate, I'll ask them if they're going to be a music major, whatever. And some of them are, some of them aren't. And I always tell them, I say, remember the things you learned and always find a way to have music in your life. I don't know what that looks like for them, but that's what I usually tell them.
That's a great message. Yeah. Always find a way to have music in your life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Now, what was it like for you, pursuing your career as an educator, and your performance? Like, what was life after high school for you?
Sure. Well, I went to Orange Coast College, and then I finished up my degree online. But in between that, there are a lot of things that I was doing that were going to affect my career, and I'll list them now. Right. One is I started a career as a freelance musician.
And I'll stop you there, because that's when we met.
Yes, exactly.
Time, that's when we both met each other.
Exactly. Yeah. I was developing a career as a freelance musician, and I was doing band music education related things.
Okay.
Now I could go on and list all of those things, but we would be here all night if I listed all those things. But that you mention it, I did do. It's funny because I did a lot of my education online before the coronavirus. The reason being is because I was already working as a musician and I was already doing a lot of teaching jobs. So I said, I don't have the time to finish up here. And I only had a few, things to finish. So I said, I'm going to finish online. And that's what I did. But there were things like I went around to every college I could find and I played there. So my grandfather invited me to come play bass drum with Concordia. I did that. I played with them for 4 years and had a wonderful experience. I played at Cal State Long Beach. I played at USC. I played at UCLA. I played at Cal State Fullerton. So I played around everywhere and developed a network. And just a piece of advice for anyone watching, do not underestimate the power of an email or a phone call or a text. I would email trombone professors and be like, hey, my name's Nathan. I play bass trombone. This is what I want to do. Can I come play with you? And they'd be like, of course, come and play with us. I didn't even go to any of those schools and I would go get a great experience. So always think outside of the box. Not everyone goes in one direction. It's like, yes, I did go to school and do all these things, but I was all over the place. I did a music internship with my grandfather as an assistant band director. I was a brass coach. I was hired as a trombone specialist to come and coach elementary school kids, all kinds of things. So always keep your options open, I would say, with that. But that's kind of what my experience was like. And in that time, I was honing my skills as a teacher and honing my skills as a player. And that's currently what I'm doing.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice, because I was in a similar situation. After I finished my undergraduate degree, I was like, okay, well, great. I finished. I didn't have anything really lined up afterwards. I knew I wanted to continue playing. And so I reached out to all the local universities. I said, hey, my name's David. I have a degree. I'm interested in forming my own group. Could you recommend any of your students who might be interested in being a part of a brass quintet?
Yeah, for sure.
And so, sometimes I got invited, say, hey, can you want to play with us? Play with our ensemble, or, hey, here are a list of students. And there were definitely times where, I didn't get a response back.
That does happen.
That happens. Yeah.
It's not all rainbows and butterflies.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. But I think, one of the things that's, I guess I'm trying to confirm what you're saying is that, don't be afraid to then go and reach out to people. Because there are people that are there and they genuinely do want to help out. And, I think they see that as an opportunity to just advance music.
Yeah. And it's hard because a good piece of advice I got, and this can do with performing and education, you have to be a selfless promoter, or like a shameless self-promoter. Meaning it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter this, that. At some point, you're going to have to get out there and you're going to have to put yourself out there. And that's what I did. Like, there was a point where I was taking gigs and I was like, I don't know if I should be taking this. But then I thought to myself, okay, this person called me. He asked me to do this. That means he saw something in me that maybe I don't even see. And maybe sometimes there'll be times where you say yes and you got to learn a new skill or a new style of music or learn a new technique or something random like that. And that's where you just got to kind of think on your toes. It's not always going to be, not everything you learned in school you're going to be using. There are other skills that you're going to learn on the job that, mom and dad or school doesn't teach you, So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I never took a guitar lesson while doing my undergrad. And one of the first assignments was I had to teach 3 beginning guitar ensembles.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So I was like, all right, okay. I had people around me who I knew who I could, ask for assistance. And then, decided on what book I was going to use and just try to learn it as best I could and stay, a page ahead of them. And it worked out. And, it ended up being one of the classes I enjoyed doing. And I even created an advanced guitar ensemble. And those kids could do things I couldn't do. Like I couldn't demonstrate. At some point it was like, I'd show them what it was they were looking, what I wanted to do, and they were able to do it. And, they all thought I knew how to play guitar. That was the gag. These kids, they thought I had a guitar skill. But, I didn't. And they were, more skilled than I was. But I convinced them and I demonstrated and I explained these concepts in a way that they, were able to learn it. And, I was like, wow, I was fascinated by that. That was something I was worried about. So how am I going to, what happens when they get better than me? Or like, I have to actually, be a good guitar player in order for them to learn anything. But it reached the point where they were able to do things that I couldn't do. But they never knew that. They always thought I was, I did guitar professionally, or that was my
right.
instrument.
That's so good. Yeah, that's one thing I kind of learned was not a band director doesn't have to be a prodigy on every instrument. Right. I don't know where this notion comes from where a band director has to be like incredible on every instrument. That is definitely not the case. I can't pick up a saxophone and blow over changes, but I have enough musical knowledge where you have to realize a band director's job is not to be a prodigy on every instrument. It's to teach you. It's to teach you concepts to apply to your instrument, and I don't know. I feel like we need to get over this notion that like you have to be extremely crazy good on every instrument. It's like, no, you don't.
Right. And, hey, hats off to the people that actually can do that. If you can do
for
that,
sure.
Then, you have my respect. And if you can't, I don't think you're at a loss or that,
and I hate and I'm so jealous of people like that.
Yeah. And it's like, you just admire them. It's like, okay. One of the things I took away from a music seminar I attended was, the expectation isn't that you aren't, a professional. You can play at a professional level, all the different instruments. But, one thing being that you should, associate yourself with people who can do that and pick their brains, know how to teach those concepts. I think that was
that's
big
good
thing where knowing how to teach, knowing how to, diagnose and prescribe.
Yeah, that's good.
And that doesn't necessarily mean.
Mean
that you have to be a pro at it, that have to know how to play it well, but
exactly,
that you should be able to know how it functions, how it works, and what you can do to help your students.
That's good. Yeah, I have a good example of that. I got a kid that plays tenor sax, and I want to have a jazz band with my high school program. And so I told her, I was like, we have a Barry sax upstairs. Let me give it to you. And she comes up to me and she stomped me with this question. She came up to me and she was like, what reed do I buy and what's the difference? And I go, So I gave her the best answer I could. And I said, but let me get back to you on that. I call a buddy of mine, right? I'm like, hey, dude, like, can we talk about reeds? Like, what reed should I start him on? And what's it like? I just picked his brain, right? He's like, blah, 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 right? And then I told my students, like, oh, wow, you're very knowledgeable about it. It's like, no, I just call a buddy of mine. But you're totally right. Every band director slowly builds up knowledge over the years, and you realize there's so many questions that are going to stomp you, and you have to humble yourself and be like, I don't know the answer to this, but I will find an answer for you, and every year that I've been teaching, it's been like, I learn more and more about every instrument that I didn't know the year before. Hey, and now I got that in my tool belt and can use for my future students.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's so crucial. Because I made the mistake of, I came up with some ambiguous answer to sound intelligent in front of these little kids,
right?
But I had no clue as to what the heck, the answer was,
exactly,
and what I was saying at the end. And then I realized, I go, hey, you know what? I don't know everything. And so, my approach has always been, I apologize. Hey, I'm sorry. I don't know that, but let me get back to you. Let me find out.
Yeah.
Because at some point kids do know when you're BSing them, they'll figure that out. And once you're there, then it's like, they're losing respect for you.
Yeah. So, kids can read you more than you would think. Like, I've got some really smart kids this year, like my older high school students, and they can read me like a book, man. Like, if I'm not having a good day, they can tell, and if I give them an answer to a question that I kind of just whipped out of, nowhere, they can tell. Or if I don't have my day organized or whatever, kids are smart. You gotta watch what you say with them,
Right. Yeah. You gotta treat it as everything you say is what they're going to repeat to their parent.
Yes. Exactly. Things
you learn after a couple of years of teaching.
Yeah.
The things they don't teach you in undergrad. The things they don't
exactly.
teach you in class.
Well, kids are like sponges, man. Like like sometimes I'll say some weird joke they don't get, and then they'll go home and repeat it, and then they're like, "Hey, did you say this during class?" And I'm like, "No." And they'll twist it in their mind. You know, they remember the things you say. They remember.
Right. So I wanted to change gears a little bit and ask you about some of your, and you've talked about it, some of your freelance work, you know, being a trombone player, a bass trombone player. You know, anything about that, how, you know, how have you gone to acquire gigs? You know, has it been mostly through your tenacity going out there and saying, "Hey, I'm Nathan, I'm a bass trombone player." How much of it has been, "Hey, I know that guy, Nathan, and I know he can play. Let me give him a ring."
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot of ways to go about it. I'll kind of talk about my experience and what like the general tips I would give to someone. The first pro gig I played, I was like 19, and I was like, they were like, "Here's the address, here's the thing, here's how much the pay is," and I was like, "Wait, I can get paid to do this? What?" So it was at Steamer's Jazz Club in downtown Fullerton, and I'm sorry to say this, but the place got torn down. It is now some weird coffee shop or something. But Steamers used to be a legit jazz club. Like there were big bands playing. There were like combos playing. It was the place to be. So I got invited to play with a band called Arlene and the Guys. And it was a bunch of older guys. And I was the young snot coming in to play. And I played my butt off and I made some contacts. And that's when my professional career kind of started at a very young age. And this was before I finished school and everything. And I was like, they were treating me professionally. So I was like, you know, I'm gonna see where this goes. So after that, I don't know, things kind of skyrocketed from there. That was my first pro gig. And my first gig where I was kind of like scratching my head, like, there's something here. A friend of mine was a student at UCLA, and he knew I was a good trombone player. And he said, "Hey, can you come and play in our pit orchestra? We'll pay you. We'll feed you. We'll give you a place to stay. It's these weekends. Can you come do this?" And I was like, "Okay."
Yeah. Anything involving food, we're there.
Yeah. And it paid.
Food,
I was like, okay. And I said yes. And it was like the funnest experience I ever had playing music. I realized I had a love for pit orchestral work, and I currently still do a lot of pit work. It's some of my favorite work to do. But after that, I got so many connections through that school, and people that I've developed lifelong friendships with, that I'm going to probably know for the rest of my life and are going to continue to call me. But a couple things that happened there was I had to learn how to double. So I learned tuba. I made sure my tenor chops were solid, and I went and I did a good job, and they kept calling me back, and that was a solid gig I had for a while. But yeah, some things that happened in my freelance career that have been interesting is when I was in high school, like I said, I did an all-star jazz band, and I played bass trombone in that all-star jazz band. And our clinician, our director, was Francisco Torres, who currently plays trombone with Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Band, which is one of the top LA big bands, and one of the top big bands like in the world, right? And I went up to him after our performance, like after we were done with everything, right? And I was like, "Hey, Mr. Torres, you know, do you have any like advice for me?" And he was like, "Oh, Nathan, you sound amazing. Like he was like, "You sound great. You have a good sound. Keep up the work on bass trombone." And then he looked me in the eyes and he said, "But you got to double." And then I was like, "Huh." So I took that home with me. And after that, I still took bass trombone very seriously, and I still am a bass trombone player today. But I would say a lot of my gigs are on tenor trombone, to be honest. Like a lot of my work is on tenor. And I have Francisco to thank for that, because several years after that, when I started developing a freelance career, I got asked to do some commercial music. I got asked to play in a funk band. I got asked to play in a top 40s band. I got asked to play in a Motown band, a Santana tribute band, all these things. And that's all on small bore tenor. So I showed up to this gig once, and we were playing like Stevie Wonder and, Aretha
Sure.
Franklin, the top 40 stuff. And my solos were all right. I had a good sound, but my solos were like, So my friend pulled me aside and he was like, dude, like, you need to work on your small bore playing, because you're going to keep getting called, because you sound good. But he was like, I can tell, like, with your soloing, you need some work. So after that, I practiced really hard on my small bore tenor. And I can gladly say today that my small bore tenor playing is much better than from that moment. So some advice from that is, no matter what instrument you play, there are going to be certain circumstances in your music career where you're not sure you should say yes to something, and you must use your best judgment. After that moment, I started taking commercial gigs, knowing that I'm going to keep working at this. And most of my work today, pre-coronavirus, is commercial music. Like, I can honestly say, 1 minute I'll be playing bass trombone in a big band. 1 minute I'll be playing in a pit orchestra in LA, and then I'll play in a funk band, and then I'll play in a massive horn section, and then I'll go play at church in a setting where it's brass and organ, or a full orchestra and a choir. I'll go do some recording session, and it's like, oh no, can I hear this on the bass trombone? And I go get my bass trombone in my car. And, so a thing that's been a huge blessing to me is learning to double. Now with trombone, basically what that meant for me was learning bass trombone, which is this guy right here, my large bore tenor, which is like a F attachment, and my
Okay.
small bore. And the way with the categories of music goes is, the small bore is my jazz/commercial music horn. And I want to be careful using these phrases, because some people are like, oh, don't label it. I'm like, well, just to explain it to you, this is how I look at it. Jazz and commercial music. My large bore tenor is my classical horn. That's like, I get called to play principal trombone in an orchestra. That's the horn I'm going to bring. And then bass trombone just kind of does everything. I'll play it in a big band. I'll play it in an orchestra, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, my freelance career, after that day, kind of took off. And to answer a few of your questions, it's this: be the best player that you can be. That doesn't mean you're going to sound like the principal trumpet player of the LA Phil. It doesn't mean that I'm going to sound like Bill Reichenbach tomorrow, which is one of my favorite bass drum players. But if you can tell yourself to be the best musician that you can be, what are you going to bring to the table? You have what it takes. Number two, be a good person. Be good under that category. It's like, be good to work with. Like, be fun to be around. Be like, the people that you're networking with are going to be like family to you. Like for me, like that UCLA story, that contact turned into one of my steady pit orchestra gigs that I have with Encore Productions. The director for that graduated, went on to start as a conductor for Encore, and he called me to be his trombone player. And those people are like family to me. And the reason that is because I was good. I was a good player, and I was fun to be around, and I was good to work with. Leave the egos at the door, I would say. Check your ego at the door. It doesn't
Right.
matter if you're good or bad or this or that. You show up, you're fun to be around, you shut your mouth, you play the best you can, and you stick around for the hang. And that's going to get you really far. So that's kind of what's worked for me in my freelance career.
All good advice. I can't tell you how many times I played with people who thought they were professionals, and it was like, it wasn't a good experience. It's like, this person is really rude. This person's like, um, well, yeah, just really rude. Like really rude comments towards people in the section or towards other musicians, like with backhanded compliments, things like that. It's like, this person's not fun to work with. I don't care who you've played with or what. It's like, it's not a good hang.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. Super important. Any funny stories, like something funny that happened?
Sure. I actually tell this story a lot because it's a good story. I have lots of funny stories. This one's my favorite though. Now, the UCLA gig I was talking about, we were playing Legally Blonde, the show, super fun song, super fun show to play. We were sitting in the pit orchestra, and in a pit orchestra, it's very dark. You can't really see very well. You have your music stand lights, and that's about it. So we're playing, and I don't know what it was about LA, the air quality and the altitude. I had never had a nosebleed in my life, but that day I got my first nosebleed, and it was very bad.
Oh, no.
Okay, so I was playing, and I tasted like this salt in my mouth, and I was like, this is kind of weird, and my face felt kind of wet. I thought I was like dripping snot or something.
Sure.
And so I put my horn down, and I have a solo coming up in like 16 bars, right?
Okay.
I put my horn down, and I look down at my hands, and they're covered in blood. I mean, it looked like I got stabbed. It was that bad. My hands were covered in blood. My shirt was doused in blood. My face was, I bet my face looked totally red all here, right? And I was like, oh man, like I'm having a nosebleed, right? And I was like, wait, I got a solo coming up. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play the solo and deal with this in intermission, okay?
Sure.
So I play my solo, I'm dripping blood, my mouthpiece is all bloody, I can taste the salt, I probably look like a mess, and it's all running down my face, and it was just horrible. So I put my horn down, and I tasked it the next song, right? And I'm right behind the trumpet, so I tapped my friend Kevin on the shoulder, and I didn't have any tissues or anything. Right? I go, hey Kevin, do you have any tissues? And this is what happened. So he's here, right, and I'm behind him. He goes, he doesn't look at me, he just hears me, and he kind of whispers like, yeah, I got some tissues down here, Nathan. Yeah, he hands me some tissues. He turns around and he goes, oh. He goes,
that's great.
What? He goes, what's wrong? Did you get punched in the face? And I was like, no, I'm having a nosebleed. And he's like, it looks like you're a murder victim or something. So that's probably one of the funniest stories that I have. So after intermission, I went to the bathroom, got cleaned up, and I had my shirt was stained that night.
Yeah, man, they made you play too much. I can only imagine that reaction and being in that situation where it's like, you're serious, you're playing, you're following the conductor, you're trying to be on your A game, and then it's like, what you're bleeding? You're bleeding? Yeah, that's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Great. So I wanted to go on and ask you about some of your teaching experience.
Sure.
And what that has been like. So you want to share what grades you teach, what level?
Sure. I'll talk about what I'm doing now, and then we can go on what I've done in the past. But in coronavirus, just, you can throw it in here or not, but this is what my life looks like currently. I currently teach for an organization called Orange Coast Musical Arts, which is a private music organization that allows homeschoolers and students to come and learn instruments. So my students come from all over the place. They come from other private schools, and some of them are also homeschooled. So I teach for a very cool, unique program. It's a very special thing to be doing for me. I love the organization I teach for. Okay. But basically what it looks like is I'm at 4 locations, 3 of which are at private Christian schools, and 1 of which is at our own private location for Orange Coast Musical Arts. I have a beginning band, I have an intermediate band, and I have a high school band. So I have an elementary band, a middle school band, and a high school band. The high school band, we have a concert band and a jazz band and a marching band. The middle school, we have a concert band and a jazz band, and then the beginning band kids just work out of the book. So That's my band. I also teach as a private music instructor. I teach through a few music studios. I have my own business. I teach for my family's music business that does private music lessons.
Okay.
I also teach for the Salvation Army. So I do private lessons, and then I also teach. I also work as a brass coach for a youth orchestra called Blyzo, which is like I said, that's a youth orchestra, and I'm the brass coach for that. So that's currently what I'm doing right now with teaching.
Okay. And so what is it like teaching elementary, middle school, and high school? What's that preparation look like for you?
Sure. Preparation, it's just a lot of knowing what I'm going to do that day, because as a band director, we have a lot of knowledge in our head, but it's how to get it out in an organized format that's going to make sense. My beginning band works out of a textbook I use called Accent on Achievement.
Okay.
And towards the end of the year, I'll introduce them to some easy band arrangements. My middle school band also works out of an Accent on Achievement book, and we also do lots of band arrangements. My high school band, the concert band, does a lot of, a lot of concert band rep that you'll see, some pretty standard stuff. And then my jazz band does jazz arrangements. So a lot of my preparation is doing library work and deciding what I'm going to have them play. Because after I decide what I'm going to have them play, it kind of takes care of itself. That's one of the biggest responsibilities I have, is what am I going to do this year that, one, I can do better than last year, and two, is going to be the correct age range for all of my students. But yeah, it's a hard job.
Yeah.
Being a band director is very difficult. It's very stressful. There are times I come home and I just want to pull my hair out. And then there are other times, like after a concert, where I feel like I'm on top of the world. And you have to learn how to turn that band director switch off. So I would say, to answer your question, preparation, before I go to band, I need to know what I'm going to do that day, and I need to get in the headspace. Then after I dismiss them, I come home, do what I need to, and I turn the switch off. So yeah, that's kind of how my day-to-day looks with that.
Sure. And then you're teaching elementary, middle school, high school all in one day, or those are divided into different days?
Good question. I'm technically full-time, but my hours are quite sporadic.
Okay.
Because I'm at different locations. So I teach Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Friday, I do private lessons. So I'll show up to a location. I'll be there for a few hours, right? And then I'll go to another location. I'm there for a few hours. I'm at a different location each day. So like Mondays, I'll be at a certain place. Tuesdays, I'll be at a certain place. Wednesdays, so on and so forth.
Sure. Great. Yeah, great. What's your preparation like when you are, or what is your philosophy when you're finding music for your students to perform? That's kind of the curriculum, right? You're finding the music, and that's what you're going to teach. Those are the concepts you want your students to know.
Yeah. A great piece of advice someone gave me once is, it's not about what you do, it's about what you don't do. And what you don't do is give students music that is too hard for their age range. And in my opinion, I think too many band directors give their students pieces that are too hard for them. Now, I do agree that you should push your students, but I don't think you should give them things that are impossible for them to play. I do not give beginning band students full band arrangements, at least not till the end of the year when they're ready for it. I try not to push harder, like high school arrangements, to my middle schoolers, and I try not to do too much college rep with my high schoolers. It's all about finding what's going to not only push them, but they're going to sound good on. Because if you give them things that are too difficult, like if you give an elementary school band Star Wars, like the real Star Wars, they can't play it. It's impossible. That's like for later. Now, if it's like a baby arrangement where they're all unison and they're playing Darth Vader's theme, I get that. Like, I understand. But I think too many band directors give things that are just too hard. Like, I was working for a guy who will remain nameless at this
That's
time.
okay. That's
and
we don't want to
he,
get sued or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah. I don't want to rat me out. But he was giving beginning band students like grade, I don't even know what it was. It was too hard for them. And it drove me nuts because he's sitting there like trying to teach it to them. And it's like, you're not going to get anywhere with this, my friend. So I would like under the rug kind of style, like mention to him, hey, how about we play this? And here's what happened, David. We would play things that he wanted to play that were too hard. They would get discouraged. They would get sad. They would get angry. They would get bored. All the things you don't want a band student to feel. I would give them a piece and they would feel happy. They felt like they could do it. They felt encouraged. They wanted to play it. They got excited. It would make them want to go home and practice. And it just goes to show you, it's more about finding what's going to work for your group than focusing on like, oh, this is going to impress the parents, right? Their music education is more important than, how they're going to sound for the concert, in my opinion. It's all about their experience and the education they get and not, hey, look, mom and dad, I can play Star Wars. That is a big interpretation you're going to get, especially from non-music families, which I get a lot of. And another side note on that, it's not only about educating the kids, it's about educating the parents also. Hey, mom and dad, this is what I expect from your student. This is how you're going to do. Here's my email. Ask me if you have any questions. But to answer your question, my big philosophy is don't give them things that are too hard. Challenge them, but make sure they are able to play it.
Right. No, that's great. What has for you, or can you talk a little bit about what it has been like teaching right now in 2020?
Sure.
What does 2020 teaching look like?
2020 teaching has been interesting. I can honestly say I am blessed that I have been able to do some in-person teaching, which is very hard. A big heads up to people that are educators that when things go back to normal, do your research, know your area, know the numbers, all that stuff, and know that teaching pandemic wise and normal is different. It is nothing like when things are normal. I have to get there early. I sanitize the chairs. I sanitize the stands. I'm constantly having to be on the students. It's a completely different experience. But basically what it looks like for me, like I said, I'm very fortunate. I work through a private organization, so we have permission from the city to meet, but that doesn't mean that things are normal. They come in, they got to wear their masks, right? They sit down, they got to stay in their seat. They got to put bell covers over. We have to do all these weird things. And I would almost rather be online, honestly. But at first, like in March, I was full online. Everything was online. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then after the summer, I got permission to go in person. And I still don't know how I'm able to do that. I don't even know if I agree that's what we should be doing, but it is what it is. And it's pretty crazy. So right now I'm kind of half and half. Half of my stuff is online, like my private lessons, and some of my stuff is in person. And it's weird. It's been a strange year. It's been very interesting. And the hardest thing for me has been motivation. Keeping the kids motivated, especially the ones that are stuck at home and I only see them through a screen. My job is to, when they get on the screen with me, is to leave them with something that they didn't start with, whether that's a smile on their face or the privilege that they get to play their instrument, or I read them an inspirational quote or whatever. That's my goal. And how it's kind of looked with coronavirus is you have to be flexible, you have to be open-minded, and you have to be patient are the three things I would say that I've learned with coronavirus teaching.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have to, because you don't know where those students' situation is. You don't know what's going on emotionally for them, and hopefully, music is that outlet that they get to, kind of let all that go, or it's a
Yeah.
place where, all that goes away. So that's great. Yeah. I think you have to do all those things. Is there a performance that sticks out to you, like a highlight as an educator, some piece that you tackled with your students, and you're like, man, that was good. Like, I'm really proud of what they did.
Yeah, sure. I would say recently, before we had the stay-at-home order, we did do a concert. It was socially distanced and live streamed. And my intermediate band, I gave them a really hard, a piece that might have been too hard for them. And every day I would do diligent work. Like, I would go around to every student and help them during class. And it was extremely time consuming. And I almost just blew the piece away. And every time we rehearsed it, I would like want to go home in tears because it was so stressful. And like, I really want this piece to sound good. And I want them to be able to do it. So we had our concert a while ago, and I put my arms up, I counted 4, and I'm like, all right, Lord be with us. 1, 2, 3, right? And it was amazing. It sounded like a completely different group. And I didn't even realize, like, we didn't even do too many run-throughs of the song because I was mostly doing a lot of individual work. So, and this was probably something I shouldn't have done. I was micromanaging.
Okay.
And there's a time and place for that, I will say, but I got too carried away with it. And I was like, oh shoot, we should have done more run-throughs of the song. And I was like, I don't even know how this is gonna sound. So I'm like, okay, here we go. And it was like everything locked in. All the percussion parts I worked with, the tenor saxes that I was like back there playing my trombone with them, and like, no, it's like this. It's on the end of this, running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Like, oh, here, you got to do that stuff as a band director. And I don't know. And I listened to the recording, and it wanted to bring me to tears because I was like, wow, like they put in the work, like they did this, and I helped them do this. And I'm sure I have lots of other great memories, but I would say my most recent one, that was a big highlight for me this year.
Yeah, that's great. We're coming to a close here with our interview, and I really appreciate your time. What would be one piece? What was the best piece of advice you received as far as education was concerned, being a music teacher?
Sure. Let me see. Well, the one thing that pops in my head, and this has more to do with performing.
Okay.
Performing wise, the biggest piece of advice I ever got was say yes to everything. And when I took that home with me, I was like, I can't do that. And it's like, well, of course you can't say yes to everything. But when you start saying yes to more things, more opportunities open up. Now, this piece of advice started as performing, and then it moved into my education because I started saying yes to all these gigs, right? And then I was like, I remember like people had offered me job opportunities that I feel like I wasn't ready for. Like, same thing with you. Hey, can you come teach this guitar student? I don't know. Hey, can you come teach this clarinet student? This was before I had just taught trombone. I had not taught private woodwind, right? And I was hesitant. And then I went and I thought back to that person that gave me that advice. After I said yes to more performing, my life changed. I then started applying it to my education, and my life changed again. Because just because you are being hard on yourself doesn't mean you're not ready for it. Give yourself more credit. Like, if you've put in the work, try to get yourself out there. And I can honestly say now, I teach bass, I teach guitar, I teach all brass and woodwind instruments. And I never thought I was going to be able to do that. And it's because of that piece of advice I got, like, say yes, do it, move forward, do the cleanup later. because there are some times in our life where you got to jump on that ship because it's leaving. If you don't jump on that ship now, because here's the thing, you jump on the ship and then you collect yourself. You don't collect yourself and then jump on the ship. Yes, there are moments in your life where that is the case, but not everything. Most experiences I've gotten is because I said, okay, or yes. And that's how I have my current job, because my boss offered me this job and I was extremely hesitant. I was like, I don't know if I could teach full time. I don't know if I'm ready to take over this massive program. And my wife was very encouraging, and those that I've developed relationships with were very encouraging. I said yes, and it's been the best music teaching job I've had in my life so far. So that would be my advice, is say yes to more opportunities than you think.
That's great advice. Yeah, great. That's great to hear. Final question. What's the last song you've listened to?
Well, it's Christmas right now, so I'm listening to a lot of Christmas music, but I'm a big lover of jazz. So the last album I listened to was Gordon Goodwin's Big Fat Man jazz album. So he's got a lot of cool jazzy, like original, traditional Christmas medleys that he takes and does really cool arrangements with. So I'll put that on in the car when I'm driving to work.
Cool. Not a bad answer. Not a bad answer.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for being a part of the program today. This was my conversation with Nathan Fulmizi. He's the band director at Orange Coast Musical Arts. You can follow him on on YouTube at Nathan Fulmizi Trombone, and on Instagram at N2TheMeezy. And I'll have a link for all those in the description down below. Nathan, thank you so much. Love to have you come back and talk more education with us.
Sure. Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. This was great. Thank you so much.
Right. Take care. Thanks.